this is Elizabeth Clare Brewington, and I'm with Kaj Larsen, and he's a former U.S. Navy SEAL officer who served for 13 years leading elite special operation teams. And he has been everywhere with missions in Africa, Middle East, Asia, South America during the global war of terror. And most recently, he's volunteered in Ukraine. And we have a lot of people from Ukraine and Russia on this podcast. So I'll be very interested in talking to you about that. Assisting military in their defense efforts, continuing his services, and we are absolutely thrilled and honored to have you on our show. So share with me your journey as a Navy SEAL and what has led you to here.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I just don't know if there's enough time on all the podcasts in the world. It's been a circuitous journey, but thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. My in hindsight, we often think that our service is linear. It's a straight path from A to B. But the real truth of the matter is that service can have a staccato rhythm. It can start, it can stop. I have been in and out of the service several times. Starting from when I was 17 years old, I went to the U.S. Naval Academy. I played water polo there, and that's where I was really introduced to the idea of the SEAL teams. Prior to that, I hadn't really when I was a kid, we didn't have all the movies and books that you see now. We had Top Gun, so I wanted to go be a pilot like Maverick, and that ultimately led me to the Naval Academy, which then I discovered this other community of special operations forces and decided that that was the right path for me. So I was in SEAL training, which is called BUDS, Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. I was in the first phase of SEAL training on 9/11. So prior to 9/11, you could joke around that the SEAL teams were shoot, dive, jump club, which they were. But we just hadn't been involved in like consistent combat operations for many decades. But then post 9/11, it became very obvious that we were going to war. We didn't know we were going to war for the next 2 decades, but that's exactly what happened. And the special operations community carried an undue proportion of the heavy lifting in the global war on terror, which happened for the next 2 decades. I think that was part of the entire U.S. military story, but it was really seminal to my personal story. And that's how I arrived to the SEAL teams. There was always a through line of service for me. I had a couple breaks in service there. I got out. I went to graduate school. I came back in through the reserve SEAL community. But at every point in my journey, there has been this commitment to service, this commitment to serving my country and to serving others.
Wow, that's amazing. And that commitment has taken you a long way. So now that after the military career, you would say, I've had enough, but you went ahead and volunteered in Ukraine. What was that like? It
Yeah,
never
yeah.
ends. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was done with war, and then one more war just keeps popping up. No, I felt that Ukraine was a very important mission. I actually went to Ukraine under humanitarian auspices. I was there on, I think, day 11 of the war. The war started in February 24th. I think I was there by March 4th or 5th, because I remember leaving after my dad's birthday, which is March 3rd. That was very important to me. So I went to Ukraine in the early days of the war, and I was conducting humanitarian operations, helping rescue people who were stuck behind the front lines of conflict, who were in extremist situations. And me and my team and my unit, we took on sort of the real hard cases, places that um, people were having really difficult time extracting from the conflict and then bringing them across the border to safety in Poland. And in the very early days of the war, when lots of the fighting was still in Kyiv, in the suburbs on the outskirts of Kyiv, that was really kind of the most important frontline mission that we could do.
And when you think about, like you talked about the war movies, we look at all these war movies, but when we look at today's times, like I've actually had people on our show that have refugee camps. I've had people who've done movies, filming, and I'm like, all this is going on while the war is going on, and they're like, yeah, things, things go on, and I'm
Yeah,
like, really? Because, to me, I'm thinking everything is being bombed and everything, but because of people like you and because of America and the fantastic service, life is really happening over there. And I'm like, really? Yeah.
It is absolutely true, and I think shocking to people. It is true that all of the things are happening. Bombs are going
Yeah,
off,
I
that
know.
yet people still are people. And I would actually say of all the terrible stuff about war, and there is like war is a horrible thing that you wouldn't like wish or visit upon anybody unless it was absolutely necessary. It's actually the fact that people can continue living that shows these shreds of humanity and decency. I mean, one like very like small example is we were in this gigantic firefight on the outskirts of Kyiv in a suburb in a place called Makariv, which is about 40 minutes, 30 minutes west of Kyiv. And there was a tremendous amount of fighting. And at that time, the drone warfare hadn't really like picked up to the same degree that it would subsequently downstream later in the war. So the war there really looked a lot like kind of an old school World War One kind of trench warfare style where people were hiding in trenches and there was artillery shooting. We had some drones, but the tactics hadn't evolved to be as drone centric as they were later in the war. And so, in the middle of all this combat with, bombs exploding and artillery going off and people shooting in what was essentially an abandoned village, uh, I see this like, 80, 90-year-old, you know, Russian Ukrainian babushka grandma come out with a bowl of borscht to hand to the soldiers, which is like a Ukrainian soup. And it was just this like oddball
I know.
moment of humanity in the middle of fighting. And it reminds you that that people are extraordinary. They can survive extraordinary circumstances. And like you said, that's the full spectrum of life happens in a war zone because the funny paradox of war is that you are never more alive than when you're close to death.
Yeah, that's true. So from veteran combat, you became a storyteller, a filmmaker. You won Emmys. Tell me about this part of your life.
Yeah, well, I'd like to say it was deliberate and planned, but the truth is it was right time, right place, fairly haphazard. When I finished my active duty service, I was on my way to graduate school, and I needed a way to pay for graduate school. And so I became a war correspondent. And during my breaks and during my off time and my vacations, I would moonlight as a war correspondent. So I did Christmas in Afghanistan, spring break Cambodia, summer in Somalia, and I would go to these hotspots and these conflict zones, and I would just tell stories, kind of through the eyes of what I had seen. Because I had walked a mile in the proverbial boots of a soldier, I sort of had this national security perspective, and I would tell stories from that perspective. I mean, in some ways, it was like my trial by fire. Like I was learning on the job how to do media and correspondent work. But it became something that became meaningful to me, and it launched what I like to describe as the second phase of my life, which was my media career, which you talked about earlier, and it opened up all of these opportunities and avenues to tell stories, to inject my ideas in the world, to share my experiences with other people, as another form. I consider it in journalism has been much assailed lately, but in its highest form, I consider journalism to be a form of public service, and that's what I was engaging in.
Wow. You're just such a fascinating person. That's amazing. Is there a book coming up or a film?
There's no book.
There needs to be one. This is an
yeah,
amazing story. Yeah.
yeah. It's hard, sometimes it's hard to write it while you're living it, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, you can get a ghostwriter or an AI person now to
Oh
write
yeah,
it.
that's true. There's
So
probably some chatbot that knows me better than I know me. Yeah.
I know, right? So you've done a lot of leadership work with the Guild and then Rubicam. I mean, Elton will come back and interview you, but we've been through four hurricanes, and I know it's nothing like a war, but it's still very traumatic. And Rubicam has played a big role in my life, and so I really think it's one of the organizations I admire very much. So tell me about that experience.
Yeah, well, I was fortunate enough to be one of the early patrons of Team Rubicon. I had started another veterans organization called the Mission Continues, and at that time, the veteran service organization space wasn't as developed as it is today. Through the Mission Continues, I was able to write a seed check, some what the equivalent of what we'd call seed funding for a new organization called Team Rubicon. Team Rubicon started in Haiti during the early hurricane. As that organization grew, I was able to one, join the board, which was an honor to help be in the leadership and help grow and scale that organization to the largest veteran service organization in the country. Over 80,000 veterans actively volunteering to do humanitarian work and disaster response, both domestically and internationally. But I was also fortunate enough to be able to be a responder myself, and so I think your comparison for hurricanes to war zones is actually quite apt. I was able to help lead a team that went into the Philippines after Typhoon Haina, which was a Category 5 hurricane at that time. And when I arrived, I remember thinking to myself, "Wow, this looks like a war zone." The homes had just been demolished by the surge of the hurricane. We performed multiple amputations, tons of rescue work. It was an in extremis situation that most closely approximated combat to anything I had really ever seen. And so yeah, so that was great. I am super proud to have been a seminal part of the founding of Team Rubicon, to have led multiple missions overseas with Team Rubicon, and to watch the organization continue to grow, to scale, and to really help, especially on the domestic front. We started Team Rubicon really with more of an international vision and an international focus. I did a mission in Pakistan with Team Rubicon, the Philippines, but ultimately we were able to redirect a lot of that energy back towards America. Have veterans help rebuild America at whether it was post Katrina or post flooding down in Texas. And it's amazing. And the thesis there is something that I really believe, like with my core, deep in my heart, is that just because veterans take off the uniform doesn't mean that their country doesn't need them, and that their service still matters. It does. Their service still matters. Their country still needs you, and there's lots of opportunities for veterans to continue to serve out of uniform.
And that's exactly why we want you to stay to meet some of our veterans. This
Mhm.
our podcast has been awarded by veterans, which I think is just incredible. Because I interview veterans, they made me the winner of the North Carolina Veteran Business Association Award for 2025, and I was really flattered. And I said, "Listen, my service to you is nothing compared to what you guys do." So that's why we love veterans on our show, and I think your story is going to empower so many, because one of the saddest things in my job is that so many veterans lose hope and commit suicide. And so they write to me. I get all these Facebook messages and bizarre messages from around the world. And, when we talk about the suspicious links and don't click on them, I always have to take the risk with spam, because it's either somebody who's overseas writing to me saying they saw the video and they were so inspired, and they really appreciate stories like yours. So thank you for all that you do, and you have been discovered on Brightside, and you're my first Navy SEAL. So I'm so excited, and I'm going to bring Elton on in a minute. So you're watching Discover Brightside. If you like the story, share with us what you thought about it, and if you have a question, I'll make sure that he gets it. So make sure you write us a question, so we know that you're watching our videos. And thank you for supporting this channel. Thank you so much. We've had, ever since I won this award, I have a 20% increase in my viewership. So thank you all for that, and we appreciate you.